Dear students, let's talk about the themes in the preludes. The nature of time. Each of the poems within preludes relate the taking place in a modern city life at a specified time of day. First the evening, then the morning, then the night, and finally the afternoon. The poems see modern life as being artificially controlled by the clock, which leads to people following unnatural routines day after day instead of living freely and in the moment. Poems 1 and 2 are the most focused on daily routine. Poem 1 is specifically set on a winter evening at 6 o'clock and describes the streets as largely vacant. This poem begins and ends by describing events that happen every day. People cooking dinner and the lighting of gas-powered street lamps. By sandwiching the first poem between these repetitive activities, Eliot stresses the control that clock-based routines have over the lives of city dwellers. This idea is expanded on in poem 2, which details morning routines and has numerous echoes of the first poem, such as smell of steak, smells of beer, the feet of the cab horse stamping, and the muddy feet going to buy coffee, the lighting of the lamps in the streets and people raising dingy shades to illuminate rooms. Through these echoes, the speaker stresses the fact that even at different times of day, behavior is repetitive and cyclical, an idea that in turn stresses people's limited freedom in the modern world. However, the second poem also calls this routine a masquerade. A masquerade was originally a formal ball in, in which guests wore masks and took part in dances, whose steps were learnt by heart. The repetition necessary to do this is similar to the repetitive routines of modern life described in the preludes. Masquerade can mean a disguise or mask, and as such further implies that the speaker considers clock time to be merely an illusion. In other words, the modern notion of time is unnatural and false, created arbitrarily to structure people's lives. This urban routine reaches a peak in poem 4 with 4 and 5 and 6 o'clock compressed together in one line, followed by three quick examples of what typically occurs at these times. Men stuff their pipes for a late smoke, evening newspapers are published, and the vague statement, eyes assured of certain certainties, which may be a shorthand for the self-assured, self-satisfied looks exchanged by followers of such a clock-based routine. However, alongside this intense depiction of clock-based time is the introduction of Christian imagery. The soul stretched tight across the skies is likely an allusion to Jesus' crucifixion, implying that just as the skies enclose the city, urban routine is enclosed within an overarching Christian timeline. The scale of this timeline drafts the masquerades of urban life. It is infinite, containing the fall, crucifixion, and last judgment, and then extending art- into the afterlife. Time is also marked by the sensory experience of human behavior in preludes. The evening and morning are personified as themselves experiencing the cyclical smells of human life. Streaks for dinner in the evenings and stale beer from the night before in the morning. Moments in time are marked by the consumption of pleasurable and comfortable substances: food, beer, coffee, tobacco, newspapers. The movement of papers to the poem also marks time, going from fresh to curling papers to evening newspapers. The cycle of news is itself another artificial construct created by modernity. However, the poem never explicitly mentions these events, although the allusion to Jesus implies that the stale routine of earthly life can be redeemed. The poem is ambiguous about such a possibility actually happening. It ends by drawing a comparison between city routine and an infinite time scale. Worlds revolve like ancient women, gathering fuel. This hints at the possibility that, in its repetitions, Modern life is actually not a huge break from past behavior. Instead, time is cyclical, and modern people are actually following ancient universal patterns. This comparison is paired with a bitter laugh, however, and the poem leaves it to the reader to conclude whether this is some profound truth about the nature of time or just a cynical joke about the inevitable suffering of humanity. Finally, the poem personifies time as a kind of director of the play of city life. Take the phrase "time resumes the masquerade." This implies a fictional existence organized by a false order of time. In the final prelude, time multiplies to 4 and 5 and 6, seemingly all at once. But the human actions are nevertheless identical and thoughtless, ignoring both the divine nature of the infinitely gentle, infinitely suffering sky above them and the dirty streets below. This infinite nature of God contrasts with the mechanical clock time of the industrial city. This also gives another meaning to the word preludes, a reference to being before the arrival of the Messiah or the second coming when people experience time as messianic and infinitely meaningful. The last line brings the poem into historical, mythical time with the phrase, "The world revolves like ancient women, gathering fuel in vacant lots." This time is also infinite but cyclical and empty of meaning. Alienation and urban decay. Prelude critiques the alienating effects of modern urban life, something the poem argues is characterized by drudgery and loneliness. Urban society, the poem suggests, isolates people from one another, ultimately erasing the individuality and even eroding human morality itself. The city in the poem is presented as a filthy, desolate place. These are greeny scraps of withered leaves blowing around, newspapers thrown to the sidewalk, and broken blinds and chimney pots. The streets smell of steak, smoke, and stale beer, and the shades in people's homes are dingy. The most abundant product of urban life, it seems, is waste and decay. At first, the city also seems abandoned. No people are mentioned, save for the vague reference to your feet, creating an almost post apocalyptic atmosphere of desertion. And when people do appear, they are just as dirty and dismal as the city they live in. Their muddy feet trample the ground, their palms are dirty, and their foot soles are yellow, implying disease. It's as if the city itself is passing on a contagion to the people who live in it. Note how the people in Preludes also lack any distinguishing features and are instead reduced to their body parts. This underscores the sense of anonymity created by modern life. All these people are living together in this space, but that doesn't make them part of a meaningful community. Instead, the urban world seems to erase the identities, making them into just a bunch of feet and hands. This use of synecdoche further implies that people are alienated even from controlling their own bodies, which robotically follow the routines required of modern urban living. People are going through the same motions day after day, opening the blinds, getting coffee, trudging off to work without really thinking about what they are doing. In this way, cities alienate people not just from one another but also from themselves, that is, from their individual wants, needs, and desires. While the human beings in preludes lack emotion, identity, or agency, the environment itself is personified. Note how the evening settles down and the morning comes to consciousness. This suggests that the emotions that have been drained from the human characters have been transferred instead to their surroundings. It's as if awareness itself is too heavy a burden for modern people to bear, and so needs to be carried by something larger, that is, by the word itself. In poem 4, this then extends beyond simple consciousness to a moral conscience. The street seems to possess an awareness of morality that human beings in this world have lost. This conscience is further conceived of in religious terms as a soul which is stretched kite across the sky and which is also trampled by the insistent feet of the city's inhabitants. The decaying atmosphere of the city is therefore a moral sin. City dwellers have trampled this universal soul which encompasses them as part of the sky, encompassing the earth. Perhaps this mindless trampling is the reason why, although a new moral conscience is impatient to assume the world, the poem ends without any return to morality. Human beings first have to break out of their patterns of behavior, but refuse to do so. Women return to the routine of gathering fuel, and the poem's reader, addressed in the second person, can only laugh. Monotony. Repetition is built into the structure of the overall poem. Over the course of the four preludes, evening turns to morning, which returns to evening, then morning, then evening again. This by itself isn't tedious, but when you add emotive descriptions like burnt out, grimy, broken, and lonely, the cyclical nature of life in the city takes on the burden of misery, becoming monotonous. The theme of time deepens into despair when mechanical time produces mechanical people whose lives become anonymous and identical. All the hands that are raising dingy shades in a thousand furnished rooms. Debasement. Preludes contains many images of human life reduced to something partial, sinister, and broken. In the third prelude, this is expressed most directly as the thousand sordid images of which your soul was constituted. A soul which should be infinite is limited to a thousand ignoble images. Humans are described by their feet and hands, body parts that move and work and get muddy, yellow, and soiled. The speaker does not mention the moral, personal, spiritual areas of faces and hearts. Their lives are also directed by their appetites for food, sex, alcohol, and coffee. Life is described as a masquerade, a false pretense of reality. Symbolically, the songbird in the tree, representing the hope of spring, is replaced by the degraded sparrow in the gutter. The city dwellers are so preoccupied that they blacken the holy street with the insistent feet that the day state ignores the possibilities of grace and salvation. Even old women at the end are reduced to foraging for fuel. Imagism. Preludes experiments with techniques of imagism. A poetic movement first formulated by Eliot's friend Ezra Pound in 1913. Other practitioners included P. E. Hume, H. T. Richard Aldington, F. S. Flint, and William Carlos Williams. Images was a reaction against the sentimentality of Romantic and Victorian poetry. It worked for clarity, precision, economy, and dryness, and it permitted free verse instead of meter. Imagism, Imagism attempted to focus on a single image to reveal its essence. The movement was influenced by French symbolists and Japanese poetry. Imagism later inspired the objectivist poets, beat poets, and language poets. Thank you.